what is reality? Hippie guy.
The observable universe?
I suppose that answer might fly in the physics department, but this is neuroscience. Who's got the brains to give me an answer relating to the brain? Ironic t-shirt.
Reality is exactly what we see and hear instead of what we fantasize about or dream or, you know, maybe hallucinate.
Hallucination? There's an answer I would have expected from hippie guy. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? Okay, now here's something that's really going to alter your consciousness. Reality is a figment of your imagination. Who here hasn't woken up breathless from a nightmare and thought, oh, thank God, it's just a dream? That's because the neurochemical impulses fired when we're dreaming or fantasizing or hallucinating are indistinguishable from the ones banging around inside our skulls when we actually experience those events. So, if what we perceive is often wrong, how can we ever know what's real and what isn't? Last week I asked, what is reality? This week, I want to talk about normalcy. What is normal? If you feel sad, do you just have a case of the blues? Or are you suffering from a neurochemical imbalance? The vast majority of the case studies that we've been looking at involve patients whose brains are anything but normal, and there's no question they suffer. But is it all bad? For some, their neurological states might actually protect them from painful truths that no one would want to think about. Others develop a cheerful disposition that may help them cope with situations the rest of us would find disturbing. And if we are to establish a baseline, then we also have to ask ourselves how the brains of even so-called normal people respond to certain stimuli. And if we're able to treat those people living with neurological disorders, restore them to, quote, normalcy, well, of course, we're helping them. But might we sometimes also be stripping away what makes them unique? Robbing them of an essential part of who they are. So I went fishing this weekend. Caught a huge striped bass. This big. We're having it mounted in my office, isn't that right, Mr. Lewicki?
Whatever you say, Doc.
All right, so even if my soon-to-be former teaching assistant didn't roll over on me like a rat in a bad mafia flick, you'd know I was lying. Why? Because it's a fish story. But if I was a better liar, I'd have a huge advantage. Studies show the most convincing liars land the best jobs, make the most friends, and get all the hot women. So if I was really good at it, would there still be a way for you to bust me? A polygraph, maybe. Polygraph's not a bad tool, but it only measures stress response. In this class, we're interested in what goes on in the brain. And if we were to put someone in an fMRI machine and watch what happens when they make up a lie, we'd see their dorsolateral prefrontal cortex light up like a Christmas tree. Because we use our brains when we lie. We use our brains when we're being lied to. But can the brain ever lie to itself? Walt Whitman wrote, "I contain multitudes." Turns out he was more right than he knew. The self is really a collection of several distinct neural networks all running on this glob of jelly between our ears. So if there are different versions of yourself floating around inside your skull, which one is the real you? Are you the lead guitarist, rocking out once a week? Or is it your 9 to 5 that truly defines you? Can one of those selves be a devoted spouse? And the other a lying, thieving, out-of-control addict? Can you long for love, and yet still be cursed by genetics and the environment to remain the same son of a bitch you've always been? And even if you do change something about yourself, your face, your name, where you live, you might feel different. You might even be able to fool people for a little while. But can you ever actually change who you really are? Which comes first, yesterday or tomorrow? Hands up for yesterday. Right. And tomorrow? Wow. Nobody? Not one? Morticia, explain how you arrived at that predictable but unprovable conclusion.
It's not something anybody has to prove. It's just something you know.
Something you know? All we know is that what we think of as past, present, and future is nothing more than a story stitched together in our basal ganglia. Our entire concept of time is an artificial construct.
In that case, I don't need to hand in my lab report, because for all you know, I already did.
That is entirely correct. Of course, by that thinking, I may already have flunked you. Anterograde amnesia is a terrible affliction. But if you'll forgive this stodgy old science professor a moment of philosophical speculation, it's an affliction that can remind us of something very important. All we really have is the present moment. If I were you, I would truly savor the here and now. That precious and irreplaceable right this second that is never to be repeated again in all of history. Quiet moment on a beautiful campus. Your friends on either side of you. Sun streaming in through the window. Savor this while you can. Because for the rest of the week, you're all going to be busting your asses on a 12-page paper on time and memory due 8:30 Monday morning. No extensions, no excuses. Oh, Professor Pierce. Come on, you guys, this is the fun part. What is a conscience? Is it something we can locate on an MRI? Studies have shown that people with damage to the ventromedial prefrontal cortex are actually more willing to sacrifice a human life as long as they perceive that it's for some greater good. But what about people who have no trouble sacrificing others to their own selfish ends? Is heartless cruelty our true nature? And empathy the aberration? My grandmother used to say, it's nice to be nice. And that may be true. Or are we better off spending every waking moment tending our own selfish needs? The good news is it turns out there's an evolutionary advantage to simple human kindness. We couldn't get through a cold Paleolithic winter without a little cooperation. Still, on some prehistoric level, we're all lone hunters. So it can feel dangerous to show any softness to other members of the tribe. But if we manage to lay down our clubs and our sharpened rocks, answering the call of the altruistic imperative, and be its own reward. Does free will exist? Do I exert conscious control over my actions? Did I do that on purpose?
I'm pretty sure you did.
Or was I forced to do it by some unseen neural process? Fact is, most of the neuroscientific data suggests free will is an illusion. Well, that's true. Are we simply meat puppets? All of our choices made for us? The answer to that can be found in our next class. Bye! Is there something wrong with me? It's a question we all ask ourselves. We all wonder why we don't look like, act like, feel like everybody else. Each of our brains has the exact same parts: cortex, hypothalamus, fornix, septal nucleus, so on. And yet, no two brains are exactly alike. So, being different being unique is undeniably a fundamental characteristic of being human. How bad do you want it? Whether it be a 4.0 GPA, $1 million, or just getting laid. Ambition drives us all. What William James called the worship of the bitch goddess success. Now, Freud would have us believe that all drives stem from the libido. Sorry, Sigmund. Success is neurologically determined by one's ability to stay focused on a task. And persistence is a function of an active limbic system. Take, for instance, Gridiron Guy here. Clearly, his limbic system isn't firing on all cylinders. Either that or his ambition to win the Heisman supersedes his desire to pass this class. Sorry. Morning, sunshine. Speaking of passing this class, please pass your midterm papers to Mr. Lewicki here. His ambition is to read them all tonight. Our ambitions and our dreams give us a glimpse of a beautiful someday. And they can help us get through a sometimes less than beautiful today. It's a tricky thing, though, ambition. It can blind us to the price of success. It can consume us, leading to dangerous obsessions or empty hedonism. But no matter how much we're fueled by this natural neurological impulse, ambition isn't carved in stone. Dreams change. And even if we don't get to climb mountains, there's still a chance that we can move them. In the words of those old English poets, you can't always get what you want. But if you try sometime, you might find you get what you need. What are you afraid of? Dying in a plane crash? Or catching an incurable disease? Getting eaten by a shark? What you should really be afraid of is failing this class. What, did we scare you? Fear can override rational thought. Before the neocortex can even process a threat, the amygdala kicks in, and now you're in fight or flight mode. But this same neurological programming can also spook us, cause us to act irrationally when, in reality, there's nothing to worry about. So, can we override our most primal instincts? Condition ourselves not to react out of fear? Sometimes the billions of neurons firing in our brains help us concoct elaborate scenarios. We imagine ourselves with a dream girl, or landing a dream job, an astronaut, rock star, even a United States senator. But fantasies can turn dark. We start to believe there's a monster under the bed, or that evil forces are aligning themselves against us. All these fantasies, good and bad, stem from an evolutionary imperative. Our brains are exploring potential outcomes that might help us achieve our goals or avoid danger. But if we allow fantasy to overtake our thinking, we could miss the reality that's right in front of us. And sometimes, reality's not so bad.